All right, we are on air. It is Thursday, May 17th, and this is a check-in meeting for active development tasks for Backdrop CMS. Really quick updates before we get to the celebration. This week, or maybe it was last week, we added a search box to the forum site. So now on any page, if there's a breadcrumb, there should also be a search box so you can search for things. And on the forum listing pages, we added an accepted answer label. It looks like there's going to be some follow-up tasks to make those specific links to the answer rather than links to the question. But minor improvements as requested. So making some progress there. Backdropcms.org, we want to do some work on modules, themes, and layouts pages. This was supposed to go with fixes that went into 110 for the modules page, but doesn't look like those got in. We'll talk about that a little later. So we'll try and address modules, theme, and layouts issues on backdropcms.org first and return to the modules page changes for 111 probably. That's it for the website. So Backdrop CMS project related updates Nate would normally do, but he's got some family obligations this week, so he isn't here. He said that he wanted to celebrate with everybody, so if we can do a little like, woo, Nate style, and have a happy moment for getting Backdrop 110 out. A couple people noticed that this seemed to be our most stress-free minor release yet, which I think is great. I think our 2-week out code freeze is doing really well. But even with 2 weeks of code freeze before 110 came out, we have still noticed a couple of significant problems with the new features that went into 110. So we are going to have a follow-up bug fix release 110.1 probably in the next 2 weeks. So let's talk about first all of the exciting stuff that went into 110. We had decided to make this issue have a little bit more focus on translatable things, and we did get both translatable blocks and translatable menu items into the Backdrop 110 release. So that is a good step forward for people who need translation on their site. We also added 2 major features that WordPress has. So in terms of our list for feature parity with WordPress, we added both the comment closer, which allows us to close comments after a specific period of time on an individual post, and the post scheduler, which allows us to set a post to be scheduled at a specific time in the future. Both of those features got in. So I think that that's going to be great. They both need a little cleanup, but they are in core now. Another long-running issue that we've been working on for a really long time is allowing people the ability to upload a file as they're typing content. They can create a link and link to the file. And that one got in. It had a little UX cleanup at the very end and squeaked in, which is great. So that one is improving the editorial experience as well. So I think we made a bunch of great steps forward in 110 in terms of features we're providing to everybody. So thanks everyone for doing all the hard work on getting most of those done. And testing and improving and all that. We do have a couple of issues slated for 110.1. I don't think I got all of the most urgent ones on here. So there are a couple specifically related to the new changes that went into 110. The most urgent one is probably that people are having trouble updating, and we did envision that might be a problem, and we added a little fix in there so that people could be able to log in order to run update.php after replacing the core directory. But it looks like some people are still getting tripped up a little bit by that. And we had some additional ideas that included Mike's fantastic suggestion to just put the login screen on the update.php page, which I think is pretty reasonable. We will need to bootstrap some of Drupal in order to be able to get that login form to process, but I think it is, or sorry, some of Backdrop, but it is going to be far less than a full bootstrap. So the reason update.php page doesn't have anything like menus on it right now is because it doesn't load the rest of the system. It only connects to the database. But I think that we can probably make a login form work there, since that doesn't need as much of Backdrop as the rest of the system does anyway. So that's one good idea. Also, it does look like people are sometimes having trouble realizing they need to run update.php after doing a core update. And it might also be a good idea to put some messaging, like if a site is offline because updates need to be run, figuring out like where to notify them that updates need to be run in a way that's a little clearer might be good. We have it in the release notes, but obviously not everybody reads all of the release notes when they do an update. So finding some clearer way to communicate that to people would be great too. If anyone has any ideas on that, we could look into that. After adding the menu translation change, we noticed that there was some additional markup being added to the bottom of the menus page, very minor aesthetic issue, that was slightly embarrassing. That problem already has a pull request and is ready to go into 1.10.1. I think it's marked RTPC. A couple people have confirmed that the pull request fixes the problem, so that should be good to go. And then there was another problem. I'm not sure we have an issue for it yet. Related to the fix for layout handlers that might need looking into as well. So I think if we can get those three things done, improvements to the login while update.php is being run, all getting printed to the bottom of the menus page, and the layout entity loader callback, I think that was the other issue. That would be good enough to release 1.10.1, but we'll probably get as many of those fixes as we can in the next 2 weeks and release in 2 weeks or less. So if we can get all three of those fixed before then, we'll release sooner, but we'll see how it goes. Oh, and as you're testing stuff, there's other things that come up. We can get in those improvements too. I know there are a couple people working on usability improvements of various interfaces of the new things that went in. I would like to consider continue working on the modules page update and see if we can get that in, but we'll just see how much we can get done before the release comes out. A couple of other things that are carried over from the last release, database credentials. We wanted to add a status report error if your database password contains a string that can't be properly URL encoded. I think that's still waiting for some work on the pull request there in order to get that in, but that's been carrying over from the last few bug fix releases. And then the big one, issue number 37, about improving the modules page. We have a pull request. The current pull request needs work, but we have a bigger question of if we think the pull request as it is now is an overall improvement to the modules page. So if you haven't looked at issue number 37 and you have feelings on how the modules page is working, I would encourage you to take it for a spin in the sandbox and see if you think the modules page is too busy or improved, and weigh in on whether you think the current approach is going to be good or not. We have a couple of other options. Like right now, that pull request adds 2 new features. It adds radio buttons and it adds a select list. We could add one or the other or neither. And we also have the option of providing tags in modules info files without changing user interface. So we had this need for tags in other places as well. We could make the info file change and the standard change and use that information somewhere else before having user interface that leveraged it, because we do need it other places even if we don't need it on the module page. But I thought it would be weird to introduce a change without the user interface change, so I wanted to do them together. But let's get some feedback on that too, if you guys would really like to have tags so that you can find modules on backdropcms.org, but you don't want them so you can find modules on your site. That's definitely valuable feedback too. So I would encourage, I know that's already a really long issue, but I would encourage anyone to help us sort of move forward on it, because right now there's a whole bunch of people with different opinions and it's hard to tell whether this is better or not than it was before. And let's see, that's all I have on the agenda for items to talk about, but is there anything that has come up that anyone else wants to talk about relating to 1.10 or things that we should be working on for 1.10.1? No? Okay.
With issue number 37, what's holding us up? The 2 things that I remember is whether we should have the drop-down thing that there were concerns that it might get wild, you know, too many things. And then the other one was the alphabetic order versus
Yeah,
grouping.
if the groupings, when you land on the modules page, if the groupings are providing any value. So we deliberately decided to leave them in the initial like Backdrop 1.0 release. But now that we have tags, it's questionable as whether they're still providing the same value. Some of us really like it. Some of us really don't like it. There's a question of whether, like, if it's there initially, should it remain there when you filter? So yeah, just a feedback on if the groupings are adding value, if the filters are adding value, and if not, if a subset of what we're doing now would be better.
Yeah. Personally, it feels that those two are very minor or trivial to be holding back that improvement. But that's my personal opinion.
Yeah, I mean, I think Nate looked at the pull request and tested it and thought, I don't think it's better in the pull request than it is now. And so the question is, like, if we're cluttering the module page too much, does it create more confusion than it adds clarity? So I think that's the big thing, is like we want to make sure we're making the page better and not worse. And he was concerned that we might not be adding a lot of value here. So I think if we just have more people weighing in one way or the other, then we could unblock. Like, even if Nate's like, I'm not sure it's better, but we're like, well, let's start with half. Like, let's leave off the tags and add the categories or add the core filter, whatever we want to start with. If we can determine that, yes, that's an improvement, then I think that would be good. But I'm not sure. I'm not sure he's clear on whether we have a consensus as to if the current approach is better than what we have now. And so he doesn't want to put it in until we get more feedback. I think we lost Gregory.
No, he's still here. Okay. There's people walking in the background, that's why I turned off.
He also got really quiet, so I was worried.
No. Well, I guess from what you said, it's the people that have already chimed in, but there's no point in us repeating the same things, but I'll see if, I don't know.
Yeah, I know you and I have been pretty vocal on that issue, but if anyone else, I mean, it could also be that other people are like, I'll deal with the modules page however it is. But yeah.
I think that this issue was one of Jeff's and then Doc Wilmot's also favorites.
Yeah. Doc Wilmot's been pretty good about explaining his reasoning for wanting alphabetical order. I think it's just hard because there's so many people on both sides of the issue to know what's best to do here. Which
makes me think that maybe, see how in the Views UI we have a Views setting thing, a separate tab that allows people to turn on and off the automatic preview of the queries.
Yeah.
Stuff like that. Well, I don't know, because we seem to be split half and half. Maybe if we made that a setting. I don't want to complicate things. I hate to do that, but it seems like some of us prefer it one way and the others the other.
Yeah, we've done that a couple of other places too, where if it's been really clear that like there's a developer preference versus an end user preference, we've like moved the setting into like develop module, which I think makes sense. But yeah, I think here it's not so much a like distinction on role as like personal preference. So I'm not sure, like, that isn't something that maybe belongs in develop module. So I don't know where we'd put a setting for that, but we could figure it out. Maybe in system or something if we needed to have one.
Yeah.
Also, the way that page is built is a little bit complicated, so we need to see if a setting, like how much more complicated it would get if we wanted to have a setting in there, because it does all this crazy looping to build the field sets and it build all of the arrays in the right order so that it can print them out. Modules page is kind of complicated, but yeah, it's an option.
I mean, my personal take on that is I see that unless there's another third or a fourth one that I can't remember now, it's those two things that I mentioned, the drop down and the alphabetical thing, which makes me think, you know what, just make a decision on those two, either remove them or have them and just get the feature in. I wouldn't like. I would prefer them a certain way, but I don't mind. I don't want these to hold back the feature. That's my point.
Okay. Let's see. So that's all we have for 110. And I don't know if you think it's worthwhile for us to look at all the issues that got bumped to 111 and pick some items to focus on for the next minor release now that 110's out. But that might be something for us to reevaluate now that we've gotten a handful of these translation issues in for 110, to kind of look at what's left for 111, what's next on our low-hanging fruit and high demand lists here for features we want to revisit. Is there anything else we should talk about today? We have a general discussion, open Q&A section.
If there's a moment, I have a couple questions.
Sure.
I've been trying to get this save draft thing working, and I have questions that are unrelated to save draft, but it's related to the scheduling functionality.
Okay.
So apparently the status in the database is still set to 0 if an item is scheduled.
Yeah, I don't remember exactly where we came down on that at the very end, but I think there were some problems with changing the node status value. So they ended up switching back to just using the scheduled date.
Okay.
I don't remember what those problems were. So I think that the schedule, there's like a scheduled column, and the only difference between an unpublished node that's scheduled and one that isn't is having a date in the date.
So the question that raises for me, there's a couple of places where I think it could be clearer that something is scheduled, and right now it just shows up as unpublished. Okay. One of the places after you schedule it and you get that little message, but then if you come back to that page later, it just says this post is unpublished. I think I created an issue saying that maybe it would be better if it said this post is scheduled to be published.
Okay. Is that in the basis theme, or is it like a message?
That might be a basis theme, yeah.
Okay.
And then the other place that I found confusing when I was trying to work on this issue was when I went to the main content page. It just says status not published and published. Schedule does not show up there.
Okay. Yeah, that's probably just because it's looking at that one column. We'll need to add, that's I think a views integration thing where we'll need to add some magic to that value so that it can be smart enough about that.
I can find that other issue and just add it to the same one. I think they're related.
Okay.
Or similar.
Yep, that'd be great.
Speaking about the save draft module, I can't recall, do we have any plans like around the roadmap for getting something like workflows, like a lightweight version of workflows in Backdrop?
I don't think we have a roadmap for it yet, but there has been discussion about it somewhere. I don't know if that was in the forum or in the Backdrop Ops contrib queue. But I definitely remember people trying to figure out like what is our workflow solution going to be, and whether we were going to do something like Workbench or something like Workflow.
Yeah, maybe something more lightweight. I've been playing around with what Drupal 8 has for some versions now. Maybe having the whole workflow functionality makes it too complicated. And I was thinking maybe we could get some defaults and an API that people can build upon and leave the UI thing of things as contrib or I don't know, an optional module in core that people can turn on and then tweak the workflows. But out of the box, we provide a few workflows that make sense or something. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think we need to spend some more time looking at the solutions that are out there and trying to figure out what makes sense. I'm personally hesitant to put APIs in core without UIs. That feels kind of contrary to our intent. But now that we have scheduling in core, we might have a sort of a model for this is how you create a new state. And that might be something that would be easy for people to build off of. We just need to work out all the kinks that we've discovered with it already and figure out, how to make that more extendable rather than like, oh, well, we've tacked another state on, but is it possible for Contrib to do it in the same way, or do we need to actually put in hooks to let people do it, or what? But yeah, I think making it easier to extend that is definitely going to be valuable somehow.
And what triggered my whole idea on that was that I would expect functionality that the Save Draft module offers to be in core, actually. I don't know how this feel.
Is that what you're working on now, Larry, with the Save Draft?
Yeah, I'm just going to make a release today that works with 1.10 and the scheduling. It wasn't working previously, but I think I've got it going now.
Okay. So yeah, let's take a look at that, Gregory, and see what the difference is between what that provides and what core provides, and see if it would make sense to put that in core too.
So this relates to other things like having parity with WordPress and similar features like being able to send a node to a trash bin that it can be recovered from instead of deleted. Small features like that that, if not in the next 1.11, maybe the one after that, whichever makes it. But it would be great to have those tiny features, the details that make the product better.
Yeah, I think that'll be great with scheduling and Save as Draft. That those would give us a great model for workflow in general, and we can look at what's necessary to get those working and see if our APIs are good enough as they are, if they need improvement in some way. Will you create an issue, Gregory, for Save as Draft in core?
Yeah, I will. Of course. You don't have to ask.
We'll figure out when that makes sense to do, but at least so we don't forget. Anything else we should talk about today? Nope. Okay. Well, then I would encourage everybody's homework for the next week to take a look at the 1.11 queue, and let's talk next week about what we want our focus to be for the next release. Well, great work on 1.10, everybody. Go team. All right, have a good rest of your day. Thanks for coming.